What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Footy Travelers podcast, the show that explores and connects you to the world through the beautiful game. I'm Colin Martin, and with me today is someone who has explored soccer literally around the world, not over the course of a lifetime or even several years, but in a matter of 15 months. Want to know what footy looks like in places like Albania or Bosnia, why away players arrive to matches in Indonesia in armored vehicles, or how Argentinian soccer parents compare to those here in the States. We discuss all that and more with Andrew Baggaley of Because Football Media, a fellow footy traveler we've had the pleasure of meeting at kit expos disguised as soccer tournaments like the Icarus Cup, and who, funny enough, shares my and Mike's experience living and teaching abroad in Bangkok. Beautiful small world stuff. So stick around and enjoy the episode.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, and one quick editorial note. Due to an audio technical difficulty, we'll be popping back over here from time to time to introduce new parts of the conversation. All right, back to it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Footy Travelers podcast.
So how does someone even conceptualize what Andrew did with his Footy World Tour? How did he make it happen? And what inspired him in the first place?
Yeah, I think maybe like a lot of people listening have just had a passion for the game for a long time, or even not. But I think something that is really special and something I've always loved about the game is the global nature of it, is the diversity of it, of all these different places putting their spin on something that is the same, but so different based on culture and history and background. And, I think that really stuck out for me, even, as a teenager, like reading certain books of people have read, like Football Against the Enemy by Simon Cooper was really big for me. Similar to like, what's the other one? How Soccer Explains the World,
Yeah.
Similar vibe, right? Where it's all these stories of like the political, cultural, symbolic importance of what the game is in a given place. And so something about that always really stuck out to me. And even going really way back, one of my favorite like first books ever was like an atlas as a kid at probably like 6 years old, of looking through a child's atlas. So like nerding out on that level, I was very much into that, and then other sports, and then just became footy at some point. So I think there's always been that interest, and similar to yourself, of just traveling for the game or just for pleasure, always trying to seek it out. So when I'm studying abroad, back in college in Germany, I'm trying to go to Bundesliga matches, or I'm playing games, or trying to travel around to, I went to Barcelona for a week. And of course, like the first thing that was on the list was going to the Camp Nou, going to a match. So, it's always kind of been built in. And then I think when it became more formalized for Because Football, was almost like a rekindling of, similar to as a teenager reading these books and being interested in writing about the game, was that kind of interest that kind of went dormant for a while. And then I kind of realized, with YouTube, with the ability to start your own podcasts, all these tools we have so accessible to us, I was like, maybe we should try something. So I can't pinpoint like a specific moment where I was like, hey, I want to do this Because Football thing or this media. In terms of the traveling, the first like prototype experience for that was February 2023, trip to Paris. So it was right after the World Cup. I've been watching the World Cup. Messi raises the trophy. It is like the punctuation on his career. He finally gets the World Cup, and it's like, I've never seen Messi play. I have to do that. Like, it's something for my life. And as a fan, like, I've got to see that. So at the time he was at PSG. So I said, okay, I need to go see him play in Europe, still somewhat at the height of his powers in that, or not the MSN, but it was like the Mbappe, Neymar, Messi, that time. And so it was a Champions League. I think it was the round of 16 against Bayern game that I saw. Like, okay, that would be awesome to go to. And it happened to be on Valentine's Day. So I'm like, okay, Paris, Valentine's Day, romance. I have to at least extend an invitation to my then fiance, now wife. Like we got it. And it's not, I'm saying that it wasn't a burden in any way. I was happy for her to go, but I'm like, all right, this might change the nature of the trip a little bit, right? It was an amazing time, right? That we had, it was a few days, I think it was like 3 full days. So this Paris trip became kind of the prototype where I said, all right, this is finally the impetus for me to start a podcast. So literally on the drive to the airport, to Newark Airport to fly to Paris, I'd record the first ever podcast episode with shout out Laurent Tresfield. French played at Oklahoma State. She played soccer at Oklahoma State. And then at the time was playing second division in France. So I was like, all right, we're going to record this podcast. Then I'm going to go see her game in 2 days. So we got to meet her. We went to a second division match. Connected through LinkedIn with like a youth club outside of Paris. Got invited to one of their camps. Just happened to be like holiday camp. I have a background as a coach as well. So I got to run some guest sessions at the camp and stuff, which was really cool. Made a friend, a connection there. And then it was like going to the game. So I was kind of testing out this way of like more formally making relationships, reaching out to people, Instagram, LinkedIn, doing some research on the place, and then getting to immerse myself in that culture through the game in like a strategic way instead of like, hey, I'm just going to rock up and see what happens. So that was an incredible trip on all levels, and was kind of like, oh, this is maybe something that can be replicated in other places. And I think that's where more of like the storytelling piece of doing longer form YouTube and then how the podcast fits in started to like become a little more clear in my mind.
With the Paris experience under his belt and a willing, committed partner to support him, Andrew was ready to take his footy travels further and farther. So where to next, you ask? And how long was he actually away?
A little, sometimes I think a little like too long, but no, it was great. Been back a couple of months now, and it's nice to be home. But if anybody's thinking of like how to do something similar, it was just luckily having a partner who was like had very similar values and also had the flexibility of, having their own business or remote work. Mm-hmm. It could really be a practical thing to make it happen. And then we kind of took probably 2 years more or less to gear up for this, financially, getting ourselves in the right place, business wise and all of that. And then, it was just, we kind of just went for it. So I'd say like that whole trip kind of started for me with a trip to the Ivory Coast to go to AFCON, African Cup of Nations. That was like January of 2024 for a week. Again, that comes from me starting a podcast, and a guest I had Harry Varley from Leeds. Scout was traveling all around Africa, scouting at the time for a Belgian club. Now he's based in the Gambia, which for those listening, you want to know like where the like next real talent's coming out of Africa that hasn't really been seen before. It's the Gambia. We kind of hit it off from the podcast, stayed in touch, and he's like, you should come to Cote d'Ivoire. Like you should come to Abidjan. Like I'm going to be there. For those people that know, the Toure brothers, Gervinho, yep. I'm going to miss a couple other guys, but like there's a legendary academy in the Ivory Coast called JMG Academy that developed these guys. And then, developed the connection with Wenger, but JMG, Jean-Marc Guillot is a French guy who moved there. They built like a dynasty in the mid 90s. And so there was a bit of that lore of like, okay, getting to connect to that. So went to the Ivory Coast, saw a couple of matches there, which was amazing. It was my first time in Africa. Got to just ride around with Harry the whole time. So we went to all the games together, but then because he was a scout, I just rode along with him, and we were at this like elite under 18 tournament of like the top 5 or 6 youth academies in the Ivory Coast. So he spent some time coaching in, I'm going to get it probably wrong at the top of my head, but, in Ghana, I think he was in Uganda for a year or two running an academy there. Like, so he'd been around for a couple of years, and then his job was basically, he was living out of a suitcase month to month in different places, all over Africa, and specifically places that aren't the typical hotbeds because he was looking for value. So you go to places like Ghana, even the Ivory Coast, Nigeria. These are places where player values, as crazy as it sounds, like in comparison to Gambia, for example, or Tanzania, like player values are overinflated. And so he's really looking for like those diamonds in the rough. So I was like, that's such a fascinating lifestyle. And then, so that's why I reached out to him to be on the podcast. And then we just hit it off. And he was like, hey, you should come to Ivory Coast for AFCON. And I was just kind of crazy. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do it just because this guy said I should do it, and kind of set everything up. But that whole trip, whether it was the soccer related, whether it's, I'll plug the Because Football podcast and the conversation we just had in terms of like talking about the relationships you build at a international tournament kind of vibe, like just people at the hotel and different people I met, it was just like unbelievable.
After the Ivory Coast, Andrew knew that footy traveling was for him and decided to go all in. So, following a quick pit stop stateside to take care of some business, Andrew once again found himself with some professional connections, this time in South America, to a fairly famous top-level Argentinian club.
Yeah, so similar like playbook, strategy, whatever you want to call it. So after the Ivory Coast, came home for about 2 months, quit my day job, and then my wife and I, our first stop on our like world tour was Buenos Aires, Argentina. So we ended up spending like a little over 2 months there, which it was a great starting off point on a lot of different levels. But yeah, in terms of the soccer, it was like again just hitting LinkedIn and typing in like Argentina or like Buenos Aires and different things. At my past job, I was a recruiter, so I was used to using LinkedIn and using the recruiter tool to like search people by location and all those things. So I was accustomed to it. And
it's
yeah,
making sense now.
Shout out Harry, but shout out Emmy Morelli, my buddy Emmy. Emmy was born in New York. I think he lives in New York for like 2 years, and his family moved back to Argentina. He coached at Independiente in their under nines, and then now at River Plate. So my third day in Argentina, actually I did the same. I got to also shout out, another guy at Racing Club, another huge club. Like pretty much my third day in Argentina, I'm at like closed door youth friendlies between River Plate and Racing Club. So Racing has produced Rodrigo de Paul, Lautaro Martinez, so big club as well. And it's like, I'm watching everything from like the under 12s to the under 18s between River and Racing, like some of the best players in Argentina. Again, I'm just some guy, that was actually my first ever long form video I did on YouTube was that, but it was that. And then Emmy with River played the under nines, going to friendly matches, watching them play and like getting to be in this environment, just seeing like that side of a game too. It's not always just about the pros and the biggest stadiums, which I got to experience, but like to see what it's like, just how do the parents act? How do the coaches, what's their demeanor? How do they like
Honestly,
feel it and live it?
How do the parents act down there? Because I know how they act here in the States. What are parents like down in South America?
It's a great irony,
soccer parents.
I would say. Yes, soccer parents. So I would say there's two main distinctions. So you have like the proper professional academies.
Mm-hmm.
It is like so docile. It is quiet. Like you don't hear a thing from the parents because the expectation from the coaches is like, we're in charge. We are the coaches. You are not. Like you can sit there, you can sip your mate, and if somebody scores, you cheer. And other than that, like that's it. Like you don't hear anything. And this is at the biggest clubs. And I think it's probably one of those things where the biggest clubs, the coaches have even more influence and power. So the parents toe the line 100%. Yeah. Now, when you go to like the neighborhood local clubs, which most kids until they're like 11, 12 will generally play both. So you like train twice a week with River Plate and you play a match on Saturday. But then 1 or 2 other days a week, you're training. And then Sundays, you have like indoor, like futsal, essentially futsal games with your neighborhood club. And so that is a different environment where it's more of like, then you have a little bit of that. It depends again, because like some of the guys are coaching both pro academies and the neighborhood team. So they have that respect, prestige. But that's where the parents open up a little bit. And if you go on like Instagram and type in like the term in Argentina is literally baby football. If you type in like baby football into YouTube, Instagram, and you'll see like the parents, they have the drums, they have the big banners, the tifos. Like the one game I was at, it was like kind of a local derby that one team usually wins every game. So it's like a derby, but it's not, the one game that the other team that normally loses had a chance. Their parents are singing. You can feel the tension in this little gym. Like, that's different. So there's distinction. So they absolutely have it where people live the game, but then you have it's like, okay, you got to toe the line as a parent. But it's such an economic reality similar to in the US, we see it where like kids have the opportunity to change their families' lives by becoming a pro. But also the prestige of like having a kid in a big academy. A friend of mine who I'd met down there, his job is like, he's just a photographer and he just goes to academy games and takes pictures of the games, and then he sells the photos to like the parents, and they like he makes a living off of just taking pictures of like U12, like of some of these like professional academies, because parents want the pictures and the kids do for social media, but also to have at home because it's such a source of like pride.
15 months after heading to Argentina, Andrew and his partner were back home. But of course, there were plenty of stops in between as they tallied a country count close to the American drinking age.
I think it's close to 20 that I like we either traveled to, and then in pretty much all except for like one, I would say, had some kind of formal footy experience, going to a game or at an event or playing or something like that.
I would argue that no global footy adventure is complete without a stop in the place that the locals love calling the home of football. Andrew would agree. What surprised me, though, was Andrew's UK club loyalties, mostly because before meeting Andrew, I had never even heard of his favorite team.
Yeah, so the interesting with the UK, I've never been to a Premier League match still, so that's still on my list. I've actually never been to a game still in the Prem, but yeah, for me, next to the union of MLS, being a Philly guy, who I support and want them to do well, but even more some way fervent and fanatical would be my support for Port Vale Football Club, Stoke-on-Trent. This year of League One, for the last 10 years, generally of League Two. We've had, some runs, but, that would be the club, the second club of, to an extent of Stoke-on-Trent. Everybody knows Stoke City, who had a good run in the Prem and everything. So yeah, but the Vale is my club.
Why Port Vale?
That is the question. Basically, because I'm a footy hipster and contrarian, and I like to just for the clout of that guy who's like, I listen to the bands you never heard about,
right.
Only the band before they got big or whatever it is. So there's definitely there's authenticity in that, and like the origin story of it a little bit. On my dad's side of the family, they're originally from Stoke-on-Trent, but like 100-something years ago. So I'm, I don't know, fifth generation in the U.S. But went over in college, my freshman year, with a friend to visit, our distant cousins for probably a week. So it was a few days in London, and then to Stoke-on-Trent, which is not typically on anyone's itinerary. It's between Birmingham and Manchester. And anytime I tell people from the UK, like, I've been to Stoke, they're like, why? It's kind of like in the US, why would you go to like Cleveland or, I don't know, Arkansas, or no disrespect to those places, but it's a similar stereotype.
After the UK, it was time for Andrew to head east, very east, but not without a little bit of Eastern Europe first.
It was like last fall of 2024. First was like Albania. So I was there for like 2 weeks. Albania was an interesting place because it was like right on the tail of the Euros. They had pretty good Euros, and they qualified for the Euros, which they traditionally don't. Right. But they qualified. I was there after, so I wasn't able to experience them that. But they're kind of, you saw the banners, you saw the big billboards around and all that of the team, and they're well supported. Similarly there, although I did go to one of my last days was the opening day of the season last year, with that same kind of approach of like using the game to meet people. Like my third day in Albania, I'm having a meeting at the FA with like their head of grassroots football, which an interesting thing about Albania is they have a very well-supported, pretty new, it's only a few years old, but a very well-supported 9-a-side that they play. It's either 8-a-side or 9-a-side. So it's not 7, it's not 5-a-side. So they started this like amateur league that's 8v8, and it gets more fans than a lot of the professional teams do. So I went to like the opening match of the professional league of Albania, and there was like maybe 3,000 people there. But then you go to these like 9-a-side, which I didn't get to go personally, but I met the guy who kind of started it, and they run it. And it's like they're getting hundreds of thousands of people for these fully amateur games because it's like guys from the neighborhood or like ex-pros. Right. And it's this different kind of vibe and environment that people have gravitated to. So that was fascinating in Albania. Then we were in Bosnia for 2 weeks. So we were in Sarajevo. So I got to go to a couple matches there. FK Sarajevo, Železničar is the other big team in Sarajevo, which is just a fascinating city. Železničar, their like club song is still like one of the most impressive. Like it's like it's kind of got this like slow rock tempo, but it's like a very heavy, it like reminds you a little bit of like, it's not a chant, it's like a proper song. that's like 3-4 minutes long, but it's like, it evokes some of
theirs?
that real like war cry. Yeah. And that's like their unique club song that they sing before each game.
As we mentioned at the top, Andrew, Mike, and I coincidentally all share the same experience of time in Thailand, with all of us experiencing footy there in different ways. We'll discuss Andrew's experiences there in a minute. But Andrew got amongst it in Southeast Asia in ways we could only dream of at this point. So I was thrilled as he shared his take on the overall footy culture landscape in one of the world's most diverse and ancient regions.
Yeah, so I think we share an interest, obviously a love for that part of the world, and then through that, the extension of the soccer culture. As I think we alluded to a little bit, like Premier League is king in Thailand, 100%.
Yeah, go figure.
Probably their viewing and things is like the metrics for that far surpasses a lot of the attendances. It really depends, and I think this goes for a lot of Southeast Asia. I would say if you're looking at Myanmar, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, maybe you're going to throw Indonesia in there too. And maybe you could include like Philippines as part of that, ASEAN, whatever, Southeast Asian countries. Sorry if I missed one or two, like a Timor-Leste. Sorry guys if I missed you guys.
Yes.
But
cannot forget Timor-Leste.
Or Brunei, for example.
Yep.
So of those, I would say that Indonesia has the strongest domestic football support and fan base. And I did go to the big derby of Indonesia in Jakarta. So I was able to go that, and it's Persib Bandung and Persija Jakarta. So I made a trip just for a day to go to that. And that was pretty amazing experience. I mean, you've got the players from the away team are driven to the stadium in like literal like tanks. Like,
wow.
It's like the armored trucks.
I was going to say like armored cars or actual tanks, or
it's not like a legit, but it's like the armored car that are like they kind of look like a inverted like Humvee or whatever. It's like the aquatic armor thing. Yeah, it's like you can fit like 6 people inside, and it's basically a tank but with wheels. And so that's how the away team arrives. And it was like, they were using a secondary stadium for whatever reason, I don't remember, but it was 35,000 people maybe. But just really, really fascinating there. I don't want to detour too far, but Indonesia probably has like the most renowned supporter culture, domestic support, also the 4th most populous country in the world. So just a lot of people and a big passion for the game. Malaysia, a handful of clubs have really good support. Thailand is somewhat similar in that like there's just so much instability in a lot of these leagues when it comes to the financial side, when it comes to governance. Like you have teams kind of come and go, but Thailand does have a handful that have kind of maintained and kept a reputation and can like develop a relationship with fans. So, you think of like Buriram United is one of those. Usually like Muang Thong, Port FC in Bangkok gets a lot of great support. They're a lot of fun, and a lot of like foreigners tend to go there. They're one of the few that's really in the city. Like Korat, like Nakhon Ratchasima, I think gets good support. So there's a handful, but it's more of like a Premier League thing. So you're seeing Liverpool, Man U, mostly, motorbike stickers, knockoff jerseys, banners, flags, whatever. Maybe an Arsenal, maybe everywhere.
Yeah.
Anyone who's been to Thailand probably isn't surprised by Andrew's report on their rich football culture. As you're about to hear, some of their stadiums are even modeled off of more European designs. And they're not without their own American stadium entry issues. Although I will clarify and argue that I really mean South American issues. Looking at you, Conmebol.
I went to Buriram Stadium, so Chang Arena up in Buriram, which is like probably one of the few examples in Thailand and Southeast Asia of like a European-style stadium. It was a derby against Muang Thong, so it was pretty packed. I'd say it was like 90% full. Actually, this was wild. That's the only game I ever been to. They weren't even checking tickets. So like what they'd done is they oversold all the tickets in the one section. And so they just closed all the gates and everything off. And you just see these swarms of people like jogging or walking around to the one end behind the goal. And like they were just like systematically opening up different gates to get in, but like not checking tickets. So they were just like on the.
This wasn't the Copa America final you're talking about. This is somewhere else.
Not the Hard Rock. This was and everybody was pretty orderly and it was fine. but yeah, I was like, okay, I was like, it was a little eerie. You're just like, everyone just come on in.
Right.
They weren't
Right.
checking.
Yeah.
So
Huh.
there, been to Chiang Mai, their stadium up there. And then I went on a little road trip with my friend Pete up to Chiang Rai, which was a cool little stadium. That was a fun time because you have like grandmas standing and singing the whole game as part of like the ultras. There were like these grandmas, or they were rocking it. That was a lot of fun.
At the end of the day, yes, Andrew's experience traveling from Paris to Ivory Coast to Argentina and through Europe on the way to the far reaches of Asia is impressive. But what I think is most important, and what I asked Andrew, was what all of his footy travels taught him about the game here, at home in the States.
That's an awesome question. I think especially because for a lot of American fans, I think we bring some sort of like inferiority, Napoleon complex into our, into the dynamic of comparing ourselves, whether it's a performance, whether it's fan culture, whatever it is. And I think, as I've traveled and seen more footy cultures and contexts in many different ways, from like fan culture to game day experience to general infrastructure and like support of sports and stability and finances and all those things that go into it, and even just like inclusivity, who's in the stadium. I've definitely started to like have I think more of a picture of what it's like in the US to an extent. And I think that's probably goes in general for traveling, is once you go somewhere else, you see how things happen in other places. It gives you the space and it gives you other examples of like compare against. So it's not like you're just like a fish in your fishbowl and that's all you know is that water. You get outside of it. So I think it's given me like more of an appreciation for American soccer. It's given me a lot more, I think, like empathy and compassion towards American soccer in general and all the ups and downs we've had, and even the nature. I think before I had a little bit of this like, hey, if we're not like the ultras, like the barras in Argentina singing, like if we can't have that level of fervent passion, then I don't want it. Or that's the bar I'm measuring American soccer by. Or comparing that to like, even at a Port Vale or a, people know from watching, Welcome to Wrexham, like those kind of connections. Like if we don't have that, like, then we haven't really arrived or made it. Or if we haven't won a World Cup, or if we haven't a men's World Cup, right? If we haven't achieved certain things. But I think that there's just a lot of different things I've seen that, I think makes me more understanding of where we're at, and more appreciative. And I think, we can get into specific examples, but I think particularly right now, though, I see for a lot of different reasons, this is like a golden era in American soccer that I just feel like really grateful and appreciative to be a part of, or to be like in this moment. I don't think we've had a moment and any opportunity like this on a variety of levels and in different forms in the US. And so I think we're kind of at a great point. And so I think the biggest thing is I learned is like, hey, there's a lot that we have, whether it comes to like the strength of our women's game, the strength of the infrastructure we have for women's soccer, kind of just like a more family friendly game atmosphere when it comes to like MLS, and things like that. Like, yeah, it's cool to go to, to Indonesia, for example. And like, there's something about the fact that players have to arrive. I'm not saying that's cool, but I'm saying there's something about the fact that players have to arrive in armored trucks, right? Which is obviously not a great sign for like human society in general. However, that is an indicator of like, well, there's something going on here. This means something, right? That people like care, even though it's a negative behavior we don't want to improve. Like at that game, I've never seen so many, nothing got crazy, but like I've never seen so many like fist fights and just like mobs like in the stands. Like, and it's like, okay. But that's not really cool. That's not cool. And it's not actually something you want to deal with. And from afar on an ultra fan page on Instagram, you might watch it because it's fascinating. Yeah. It's something that draws you in. But like at the end of the day, like, are there kids there? Are there elderly people? Are there people of all like ethnic and racial backgrounds and orientations and identities? Like, is it a welcoming space for that? Can everybody feel that soccer is their game? I look at like, even just a lot of the, the infrastructure we have and the fields we have. And you talk like, you want to really know the level of soccer, is like talk to people from other countries who have come to the US to play like college soccer. And we can debate about the validity of it, where it fits to an elite player pathway and all this. But like at the end of the day, it's delivering like world-class experiences for players, right? That like are far beyond professional setups in other places. So there's so many things, but I think, yeah, it's made me more understanding, more patient, but then also like looking at a lot of positive things happening now, just like really excited for where we're at.
Gotcha.
Andrew's footy travels are far from over. His world tour has not only made him think about the domestic game here in the US, but inspired him to share American footy culture with the world. So what's next for him and his Because Football brand? Well,
doing all the traveling not only opened my eyes for a lot of things we have here and having a better sense, but it made me like more interested and more curious about specific parts of the US. It kind of like made me like, all right, I've seen what it's like now in Indonesia or in Argentina or in Portugal and Spain, and those things are great. But what is there going on, especially with the World Cup coming, that we can kind of like learn about and share in the US? So, and then from a practical standpoint of like, it was great to travel, but 15 months is a long time to switch places essentially every like 4 to 6 weeks. It's a lot of, maintenance on things. So it was like, all right, we're going to be settled back home. But ironically, as soon as I was like, hey, it's time to come back home, I had this kind of vision or idea of like, it's time to explore more of the United States and North America, and these specific regions. And so kind of somehow, again, not exactly sure where, but come up with this idea of the, road trip to the World Cup series. So the goal being to make this documentary series exploring the soccer culture and community in each World Cup host city and region. So the goal is to do all 16. We've got 2 in Canada, 11 in the US, 3 in Mexico. But that started, pretty soon after landing back in the US, and spending the summer in Philly, of doing some of the filming of that Philadelphia episode. Was up in New England. We just released the New England episode of that finally. So it's 80 minutes of, history, but also current trends going on. I'm pretty aware of the fact that as interesting and fascinating as the history can be, and as important as it is to like share that, for example, the first ever game of soccer, I'm going to, give a dramatic pause and people can guess what year they think was the first ever documented game of soccer in the United States. But the first like recorded in the US was in Boston. It's called the Oneida game, the Oneida Football Club. And this is where the disputation comes in a little bit, because like rugby and football, I also kind of look to this game as that. So it was kind of a mix. So that was 1862. All right. So that's, it's like closer in time to George Washington and Benjamin Franklin than it is to us. Right. And then when you start to see the first ever like official, the first professional league in the US was like 1888, I want to say. And that was like this 6-team, basically the owners of like all the Northeast baseball teams got together and like, we have these stadiums, we have an infrastructure. Why don't we try this soccer thing? Because at the time it was popular enough where they're like, hey, we can give this professional thing like a go. Right. And it only lasted
that's how NYCFC was born and started playing in Yankee Stadium.
Exactly. Yep. Under the Yankees and but back then, the first team, some of the Yankees baseball players played for the NYCFC too. So, which actually did happen, in the Philadelphia Phillies, they just called the soccer team the Phillies too, because they didn't have to think about it. And some of the baseball guys played soccer, but yeah, I think it was 1888. The tricky part about it was similar to the US, and like it's always been, is that 2 leagues started at like the same time. So from the jump, they like competed and were rival like professional leagues. So there were 2 teams in Philly and 2 teams in New York and 2 teams in Boston. So that first league only lasted 2 weeks, the fully professional one, before the baseball owners were like, all right, I think we're going to pack it in. But 1888, you would still, that's still a to have a pro league. So what I'm trying to do is like make it relevant, right? And so like, what are the connections there? Whether it's going to some of the places and seeing what they're like now. Like, for example, up in New England, I went to like the site of the first ever US Open Cup game was in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. So it was called the American Challenge Cup. That was 1914. And now it's like an apartment complex, but it still is the same name of Coates Manor, Coates Field. Or the Fall River Marksman in Fall River, Massachusetts. Well, it's technically in Rhode Island, the stadium, but now it's just like a parking lot and it's overgrown, a lot. But that was like one of the first ever soccer specific stadiums of a team that, toured Europe in the 1930 and had attracted Arsenal's backup goalkeeper to play for them and signed all these guys from Britain, like recognizable teams,
Wow.
So kind of, I think it's important to like know a little bit of that, of like, okay, like soccer was up here. Now why it's gone up and down, there's a lot of reasons. But then also talking about the current trends of like Portland Hearts of Pine being, and Vermont Green, I didn't get up there, but like they're included, or Rhode Island FC. A lot of these clubs that are like newer, but really capturing a lot of energy, a lot of like local identity. And it's like, what's going into that, and how is soccer becoming something beyond this like little pool for the purists into something that like the whole town is talking about. And those are the type of things that make me say we're kind of in a golden age. And those are some of the exciting things that we're looking forward to doing and exploring around the country. So New England is out. And then we're done filming for Atlanta. So that's the next one that'll go into editing. So I was down there for a few days. So that's like everything from an Atlanta United game, Chattanooga FC, that's an MLS Next Pro, but has been a great example of kind of a smaller mid-market town and what the team's been able to achieve over like 15 years, to, they call one of the soccer town USA, Dalton, Georgia. That now they outshine their local football team, which is a lot in
South,
rural Georgia to say that. Yep. So pretty cool. So stories like that. Emory University women's soccer has been, had a stud program forever. And it's a great like academic school. To, some other little ones worked in there and just connect with the community. So I'm trying to just, the word that keeps coming up is kind of like to weave a tapestry, or like a mosaic of a bunch of different things. It's not just about MLS or about USL or pro or men's or women's. It's not only about players or coaches or club directors or agents or refs. It's kind of like a mix, and every place is going to look a little bit different based on my luck of who I'm able to connect with, and what's available when I'm physically in a place. So Atlanta's done and we'll be editing. Philly is pretty much done and also can move into the editing stage as well. Filming New York coming up. That'll be like mid-September. So New York City and North Jersey. So very excited for that. That's like a daunting one because it's just, there's so much going on. It's a huge place, but looking forward to that. So most of the East Coast, Miami will be in Miami for the Soccer X, which is a big soccer industry, global industry event in November. So Soccer X, and kind of that's going to be in Miami. We use it as a bridging point for that. The rest of the U.S. is kind of in the works. And then where you guys come in, Footy Travelers, newer developments of Mexico. So Mexico.
We're hoping to get Andrew down to Mexico City with us in October, November for our Mexico City Dia de los Muertos trip.
That's right. The Footy Travelers and Because Football Media are teaming up in Mexico City during the Day of the Dead weekend in Mexico's capital later this fall. Now, technically, the house that the Footy Travelers organized is sold out. But if a weekend of footy, culture, and a whole lot of delicious food sounds like something you don't want to miss, you can still, and should, join the waitlist. Head to footytravelers.com/trips and make sure you don't miss out on your next chance to join us. Another option is to sign up for our monthly newsletter, where we not only update you on our upcoming adventures, but all the latest news happening at the crossroads of footy, travel, and cross-cultural exploration. We'll leave links to all this in the description as well. As for my conversation with Andrew, I hope you enjoyed it and maybe found a little inspiration for a footy world tour of your own someday. If you want more of Andrew's Because Football project and his road trip to the World Cup series, head over to the Because Football YouTube channel, also linked in the description. And until we meet you back here for another episode of the Footy Travelers podcast, be loud, be proud, and be good to each other.